Welcome back to another episode of The Road Chose Me, and let's get back to our regular format, teaching you guys what you need to know to get out there around the world. So we've talked quite a bit about how to get your vehicle across international borders. You can use temporary import permits in most countries. Check out the video about that. Or you might need a carnet de passage in certain countries. Check out the video about that. But what we haven't talked about yet is how you get yourself across international borders. How do you get visas, dealing with passports, dealing with timelines, entry requirements, and some oddball scenarios. So if you're looking at going international and you want to learn all about how to get visas for international travel, stick around. I'll get into all the details right now. So the first thing that you're going to need to cross all your international borders is a passport. And obviously this sounds really obvious, but there's a couple of gotchas here. The first one is you want to make sure that your passport doesn't expire anytime soon. So lots of countries around the world, they want you to have 6 months of validity beyond the date that you're going to enter. So if your passport's going to expire anytime soon, go out and get a new one before your trip. It'll be worth it so you don't have that time crunch. The other thing to think about is how many empty pages you have in your passport. Because many countries around the world require visas, they take up an entire page with a visa, and then they use up a whole page just for entrance and exit stamps. So one country quite often can take up 2 pages in your passport. As an example, when I went around Africa, I went to 35 different countries, but I actually used up 56 pages in my passport. And I met a ton of people on the road who were running out of pages and they were getting really stressed if they were going to make it or not. And it is technically possible to go to your embassy and get a new passport while you're on the road, but it's an added stress and an added annoyance you just don't want to deal with. So my passport's from Australia and I actually paid more money to get one with more pages in it. So this is a really fat passport. If you're planning a longer trip, I recommend doing that if it's available to you. Or if your passport is already running out of pages, go and get a new one before your trip starts. Again, it'll just make things smoother and easier. I also need to say too, the advice I'm about to give, it's for passport holders from kind of the big countries. So if you're Canadian, American, Australian, a passport from anywhere in the EU, the UK, all of those countries, the visa requirements around the world are reasonably similar. But if you've got a passport from Sierra Leone or some other small country around the world, you'll need to do your own research. Don't just rely on what I'm about to say to you. So when it comes to getting visas to visit countries around the world, lots of people assume that countries would be really welcoming to tourists and they would make it easy for you to get a visa. And well, sometimes that's true and sometimes that isn't true. And as overlanders, we face some special challenges. So I'll go over different regions of the world to help you get an idea based on where you're thinking of going. So first of all, if you're thinking about driving the Pan American Highway, so all of Central America and all of South America, the really great news is all of those countries, you don't need a visa or you can just get a visa on arrival. And so that means when you show up at the border, they'll give you the stamps necessary. Maybe you have to pay a small amount of money, but basically you'll be able to enter that country right away. So you don't need to organize anything beforehand and you don't need to wait, apply and then wait a week or anything like that. So in that regard, the Pan American Highway is really straightforward for visas. A couple of countries, I think Bolivia and I think Brazil, for American citizens, you have to pay $100 US. But like I said, you could do it at the border just when you arrive, nothing to plan ahead. In terms of extending your stay, it does vary quite a bit by country. Some you can do it while you're in the country, some you're going to have to leave the country and come back again. And that gets tricky because it depends whether you can get into the neighboring country easily or not. So that really is like a per country thing. And I have put a lot of information into a website called wikioverland.org. I actually built it and I was hoping that it would become, a big resource for overlanders. But unfortunately, people aren't updating it all that often. So the information from Africa is reasonably recent because I put it all in there. But the information from the Pan American Highway, it's kind of going out of date. But you'll learn a lot of this info in iOverlander and just by talking to other travelers you bump into on the road. But certainly the Pan-American Highway is really straightforward for visas, and once you have a passport with a lot of validity, you're going to be good to go. For Europe, for most foreign visitors, you end up on what's called the Schengen system, and that gives you 3 months out of any calendar year that you can be in the EU or Europe. So be careful, because 3 months isn't very long. So if you're planning on kind of roaming around Germany and Italy and Spain and France, you will only have 3 months as a foreigner. Then you'll have to leave. Lots of people either go to Morocco, or I guess now you're going to be able to go to the UK now that it's not part of the EU, and then come back again. But it does get a little bit sticky about how quickly you can come back. And some people get away with coming back quite soon. Other border guards are going to tell you you have to wait a very certain amount of time. So that is quite a restriction, and as far as I know, there's no getting around it. If you're American or Canadian, you can't stay longer than 3 months. There's no visa you can get for that. When it comes to Africa, it really depends on where you're going as to how difficult the visas can be to get. So all of Southern and almost all of Eastern Africa, it's really straightforward. You can get visas on arrival when you either fly in or when you just show up at the border. Again, some of them you have to pay money for, and they will give you a stamp. I remember Malawi, Tanzania, Kenya, they were all like that. Namibia, Botswana, South Africa. They make it really, really easy, and you just do it when you arrive. So again, no planning ahead and no waiting. You can just do it on the day that you arrive. There are a couple of countries in East Africa, especially in the north, where that is not the case. So Ethiopia and Sudan, you most definitely have to get visas ahead of time. And this is where it starts to get sticky, and some countries around the world make it difficult. Ethiopia is a really great example. They are very much open for tourism, and they love having tourists. If you Google it, you'll find out you can absolutely get a visa on arrival. But the tricky part is that only applies if you fly into the capital city in the airport. So that's great for regular tourists, but as overlanders, we want to drive in across the land borders. You can't get a visa on arrival for a land border for Ethiopia. So this is where preparation and planning really comes into play, and you must apply for the visa beforehand. So if you're coming from the north, you're probably going to get one in an embassy in Egypt. If you're coming from the south, I got mine while I was in Kenya in Nairobi, and you can always find information on iOverlander and Wiki Overland about exactly where the embassies are and exactly what the requirements are. Typically, you have to go physically to the embassy. They're going to have a form to fill out. They're going to want a couple of passport photos, obviously your passport, some photocopies of your passport, and probably most countries in Africa, they require you to have a yellow fever certificate. So this is a certificate to say that you've had the vaccine, and they're not going to issue you a visa if you don't have this. And I actually have mine stapled into my passport just because how commonly they're needed together, and this way I can't lose it. But you'll have to do research to find out what all of these requirements are, how much does the visa cost, and then every country, it's going to be a different amount of waiting time for how long it takes them to actually issue you the visa. Some say come back later that day, some say come back next week. I've even had a couple that took 2 weeks, and that all very much varies by country. So certainly there are some parts of Eastern Africa in the north where you have to plan ahead and you have to be organized. If you show up at a super remote border crossing, they are not going to let you in, and then you're going to be in a world of trouble because you might not be able to go backwards either. So this takes planning and preparation. And on that brings me to West Africa, which is probably the most difficult part of the world to travel overland, crossing from country to country just by crossing land borders. And that's because virtually every country along the way requires you to have a visa in your passport before you arrive at the border. So again, you have to go to an embassy, you have to apply, pay some money, fill out a form, and then wait however long it takes them to issue it to you. And for most countries, this isn't really a problem. They're used to it and they say, okay, yeah, come back tomorrow, for Gabon or Cameroon, and they say, yeah, we'll issue you the visa. But there are a couple of countries in West Africa that it is really, really difficult to get a tourist visa for when you're on the road like this. Nigeria is a great example. And again, Nigeria, no problem at all if you just want to fly in as a tourist. You can even get visas on arrival now at the main airport, or you can get one in your home country before you leave home. But if you're crossing a land border, totally different story. They don't have computers at the land border, and so they can't just issue visas on the spot. So you have to go to an embassy beforehand. But the really tricky part about Nigeria is they don't really like issuing visas at embassies randomly around the world. So when I went into the embassy in Senegal, they said, "Oh, you're from Australia? No problem, just go to Australia to get your visa. Goodbye." And that was it. They will not issue me a visa. So I had to try in many, many embassies before I could get the visa for Nigeria. And eventually I did, but I believe the embassy that issued that, they won't do that anymore. Same story goes for the Congo. Same story used to apply to Angola, but that's gotten a lot easier now. I believe you can get a visa on arrival, or you just apply ahead of time online and then activate it when you arrive. So West Africa especially, it is a logistical big challenge to get all of the visas. And something else you need to be aware of is that all of the visas have a different validity. Not only how long you get once you're in the country, most countries it's a month, but some it's 2 or 3, but more importantly, lots of them have a limitation. From the day they put it in your passport, you have a limited amount of time before you can enter the country. So if you don't get there within a month, the visa is invalid. So if you get your visa way back in Senegal, you've only now got a month to drive through about 5 or 6 countries and get to Nigeria. And that's a problem because now your trip has to be so much shorter. Not only that, some of them activate the day they put it in your passport. So it might only be valid for a month. You have to spend some of that time getting to the country, then cross the entire country and leave again before that month runs out. So for that reason as well, it starts to be a real juggling act to line up all of the visas and make the dates work. One more thing to think about is some people say, why don't you just get all the visas before you leave home? And that would work if you were going to go to all the different embassies. But again, the time limitations are going to cause a real problem for you. So if some of them are only valid for a month from the day they put them in your passport, that's obviously not going to work for a long-term overland trip. So for West Africa especially, you really have to get all of the visas along the way as you're going. And it is a real logistical challenge, but it is something lots of people are always talking about. There are always discussions on Horizons Unlimited bulletin board about how to do this. There's lots of information in iOverlander, and pretty much every time you bump into another Overlander, they're going to talk about where did you get this visa? How much did you pay? How long is it valid for? And I actually had a spreadsheet where I was keeping track of all of the different places I was going to apply and, advice from other people and where do I get this visa, then I get to that city, then I apply for the next visa, and kind of so on and so forth all the way down the coast of West Africa. So it is a really big challenge, and it is one of the reasons that not many tourists go there. So it's that old effort versus reward game. If you're willing to put in a massive amount of effort, you can get these unbelievable rewards by going places that few people go. And I don't have personal experience from Central Asia, like all of the stands and Mongolia and all of those. But from my research online, it seems it's a similar story. You might be able to get some of the visas before you leave home, but oftentimes people get them as they're moving along. And they also have really strict time limits. I think famously Uzbekistan, which has that huge flaming hole in the ground that everyone wants to go to, you still can only get a transit visa for that country. So you have a very limited amount of time which you have to cross the entire country. As well as that, you have to log your route with the military. So you have to say, I'm going to drive this road, then this road, then this road. And you can't deviate from your plan when they stop you at the next roadblock. If you're off the plan, you're going to be in a world of trouble. So certainly there are some countries around the world where it becomes like a real logistical challenge and you'll be locked in. Sometimes I say it's like being on a roller coaster. You have to arrive at the border on a given date and you have to arrive at the far border on a given date. It doesn't matter if your car breaks down along the way. It doesn't matter if you get malaria along the way. You have to be there. That's just how it is. So as you can see, there are a lot of different reasons why different parts of the world can be really challenging as an overlander traveler. But what I want to say is don't let any of this deter you. Absolutely, there are people doing it. There are people who figured out that all of the hurdles you have to jump through. And I always like to remember, if other people can do it, that means I can do it. It takes determination, it takes some patience and some research, but you will figure it out and you will get it done. Just remember, talk to lots of other overlanders and find communities online of people that are doing it. And don't rely on people who just say, oh yeah, I flew into such and such a country and it was easy. Because the requirements to fly in are often different than the requirements to drive in across some remote land border. So as overlanders, that's how our community helps each other figure out all of these different challenges. So I really hope that that information has been helpful, and I know that we're all kind of stuck in place for 2020, but I'm really hoping we can get out in 2021 and that this information is going to be helpful for you as you start planning to go further and further afield in your international travels. So if it's been helpful, please do hit that thumbs up button. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. I keep bringing out 2 videos a week, all designed to help you guys get out there and explore the world in your own vehicle. I learned a ton of stuff in my 5 years around the world. A lot of it I had to learn the hard way. Hopefully I can help you guys learn it the easy way and you can learn from all of my experience. So do subscribe to the channel. Also a big thanks to my Patreon supporters. They continue to help me bring these videos to life and to teach you guys everything that I've learned along the way. So until next time, stay safe out there. Let's all enjoy this winter paradise and maybe I'll bump into you on the road.